This is Harold Letterman from HBO Sports. You're listening to Brad Ryder.
Hi, this is Pete Best, and you're listening to Brad Ryder.
I've always liked Brad, and Brad serves his purpose. I mean, he does it very well. He's a strong kid who can cause some havoc, and that's his job, and he does it very well.
You know, it's just something that you just don't say in public.
He's the sweetest guy ever. Have you ever stared into his eyes? It was like the first time I heard the Beatles.
Ryder Radio Podcast is brought to you by Community Beer Works, making good beer for good people since 2012. The future of Community Beer Works is bright with a new tap room opening. The old tap room currently closed, but the brewery remains open, which means you can still buy the beer all over Western New York and beyond. Single order hazy IPA, double order hazy IPA, both go great with wings. Get it? Single order, double order? The Whale is a classic, and there are all sorts of different varieties always coming out. And let's go Pills. It's Community Beer Works. A lot of exciting things going on, including CBW Trivia Night, which takes place Mondays at Transit Music Lounge in Depew. Get there at 7 to sign in. We'll start playing around 7:30, wrap things up around 9, and then it's your choice to stick around and enjoy beer and wings and all the fun things. Or you can get home. It's a school night. Get home at a reasonable time. Either way, we look forward to seeing you at Transit Music Lounge Mondays for Community Beer Works Trivia Night, hosted by me, Brad, and I hope to see you there as well. Now, on with the show. You know, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and a lot of times they'll take a break and they'll be gone for 2 weeks or something. But they'll warn you. They'll tell you that, all right, I'm off for a little bit, or maybe it'll disappear for a week, but it'll come back. I'm sorry. I promised part 2 of my conversations with people about Chuck Dickerson right after he died. It's been more than a month. I recorded immediately following the first episode. I actually had stuff left over from episode 1 that I didn't put in because I was saving it for episode 2. Then I talked to a couple more people, and then I just lost the files, and then a million other things happened, and I just haven't gotten back to it. Part of the reason there's been a delay is that I've been working on some things and setting some things up, and I was kind of holding off on the Chuck thing until it was all put back together. But let me just put it this way. There's a lot going on in the beer world with Community Beer Works and Thin Man Brewery, which is where I've been for the past year plus, and will continue to share information about the beer industry and things going on with CBW and Thin Man. But also, there's a lot going on in the sports world. Lindy Ruff is back. Lindy Ruff has returned as head coach of the Buffalo Sabres. I haven't cared about the team. It's interesting for me. So, at the time that Lindy Ruff was fired as head coach, he worked for the Sabres from 1997 to, I think it's 2013. I started in radio in 1996 or 7, and was there full-time until about 2011 or 12, something like that. Lindy Ruff was the head coach of the Sabres basically the whole time I was fully employed in the radio industry here in Buffalo, New York. He was the Sabres to me. The glory days, the glory era of the Sabres, the 2 super great years, not even counting the 99 Cup run, but the 05, 06, 06, 07, those are the 2 years I was the pre- and post-game host on GR for the team, and I was around the team all the time, and I went to every game, every home game, and I broadcast every road game from the studio, and I was around the team. I was at the morning skates, I was at the practices, I was at the press conferences, hosted shows with all the players, got to know Lindy pretty well, and I was done with that. He was still with the Sabres, and I was at that point working for WEC Radio, WECK. I was there for like 3 years from, I don't even know what it would have been, 08 to 11 or 09 to 12, something like that. But we were covering UB basketball, and I did a coach's show with Reggie Witherspoon. On one particular day, in order for Reggie to be able to do the show at the studio, which is on Genesee Street in Cheektowaga, just like the airport, Reggie was coming in from out of town. The only way he was going to be able to get there to do the radio show at, let's say, 6 p.m., 7 p.m., whatever it was if I picked up Reggie at the airport. He was still the UB Bulls head coach, basketball coach at the time. And while he had been gone out of town for the weekend, Lindy Ruff had been fired from the Sabres. So I pull up and I pick up Reggie Witherspoon to take him from the airport down to the studio. And the first thing he says when he gets in the car is, "Oh, man, I feel terrible about Lindy Ruff." He had heard, we're not even talking basketball. We're talking about a guy with a similar job to his, a head coach in sports in Buffalo, and he had been fired. And he told me, what a great guy he thought Lindy was and what a great coach and his experiences with him. And he asked me what I thought. And my honest answer was, I don't know if I care about Sabres hockey if Lindy Ruff's not the coach. I was being honest. I wasn't sure. Like, I've cared so much during this time, all the time growing up, obviously. I grew up in Buffalo. So, going back to, 1980-ish is about when I remember the Sabres. I remember being very sad when Danny Gare got traded. I remember seeing his picture on the cover of the Buffalo News. And Foligno coming in and that whole deal. But I remember Lindy Ruff. I had cards. I met him at Sabres carnivals, all this stuff. Lindy Ruff was a part of my life. And I said, I don't know if I care. It turned out I did not care. I have been so just zoned out on the Sabres and on the NHL in general. And I don't know, guys, did I miss anything? Did I miss much? I remember there was something about tanking. I wasn't gone. I'd go to a game or two a year. Never bought a ticket. It was always just, it's kids' school night at the game, or our basketball league is having a discount tickets. I wouldn't say I've never bought tickets, but it's never like I've got to go to that game. I am buying tickets. Here's my $300 for whatever. I have not done that. In part because I used to get paid to go to the games, and I went during the two best years that I can remember in my lifetime of Sabres hockey, 05 through 07. I was at every one of those. How do you pay for games now after getting paid to go to those? So I just don't have it in me. And it also coincided with right around the time that my wife and I started having kids. So my youngest is born in 2012, and that's right around when Lindy got fired. And I don't know, I just didn't have 2.5 hours times 3 nights a week to dedicate to even watching him on TV. So for as long as Lindy has been gone, the Sabres have been a super duper afterthought. I even said to Reggie Witherspoon during that conversation, I don't know if I care about the Sabres without Lindy, and I compared it to UB. I'm like, I don't know if I care about UB basketball if you were to leave. And he did leave shortly thereafter. And I was mad because I really liked Reggie and thought he was I still do, think he's a really good coach, a really good guy, really respect how he just came up through the Buffalo basketball world and rose to Division I coach at the top school in the area. I just think that's so cool. He did get let go shortly thereafter, and I was not pleased. And then right away they announced that Bobby Hurley was coming in, and I got over it quickly. It doesn't change anything about the way I feel about Reggie, but the UB basketball program accelerated away. They said, we can do better than you, Reggie Witherspoon. And then they did better than they did under him. And they went from Bobby Hurley to Nate Oates, which was even an upgrade. Oh no, Bobby Hurley left after a couple of years. Nate Oates is one of the top coaches in the nation. Nate Oates has surpassed Bobby Hurley. Dan Hurley is ahead of Bobby Hurley at this point also as a head coach. Still love Bobby Hurley. Love the experience with him. Love what he did for the program. Love Nate Oates. Love what he did for the program. I now root for Alabama basketball and Arizona State basketball and UB basketball, and I hope they get it back. But UB got rid of a guy because they thought they could do better, and they did. The Sabres got rid of Lindy Ruff because, I don't know, they ran out of players to get rid of, or they ran out of... It just got to a point where it's like, I guess the message is tired, and they're not getting anywhere under this guy right now, so I guess it's time for him to go. It was never a, I hope the door doesn't hit you on the way out type of situation with Lindy. It was just like, I don't know, man. I think it's time. I think we're tired. I think it's time to move on. And they tried all sorts of different directions since then. They've brought in all sorts of different players. They've done all sorts of different things, GMs and coaches, and none of it has gotten anywhere near where they were at their worst at the end of the Lindy Ruff era. I mean, that was the worst. And now we look around and say, Let's try that again. I remember when Lindy left. Two things about Lindy before we get into the audio that I've been promising for like a month, or that I did promise like a month ago and then disappeared on you. When Lindy got fired, I take that back. Not when Lindy got fired. Late in Lindy's tenure here, when it became apparent that it was probably time for a breakup, I said, I think Lindy Ruff is going to win a Stanley Cup as a head coach in the NHL. And man, do I hope it's with Buffalo. I hope it's here. And now we get that back. We get that opportunity. And I'm not here to promise that it's going to happen. I'm just here to say I care again about the Buffalo Sabres. At the heart of what they were, yes, it's about the players and everything, but the personality of that team that I loved was Lindy Ruff. And I saw him up close coaching. And I think back to just practices I've seen and watching situations he would put them in that just blew my mind. The kind of stuff he was doing with these professional athletes and motivating guys who were at the top of their game, who were among the best teams in the league during certainly those 2 seasons. And what he was able to get out of them and how he knew how to push their buttons. I loved it. I respected it a ton, and I'm thrilled to have it back. And then the other thing, I went and found it and like reposted it at the top of my Twitter feed or X feed, whatever you people call it now. I remember when all the players were gone, and I said, well, now that the players are gone, can the message be fresh again? Can Lindy come back? And this was, I don't know, 5 years ago, something like that. And they've gone through a few coaches since then. And finally, I mean, you got the sense when Kevin Adams spoke last week about the kind of guy he was looking for. I was like, oh, he might be talking about my guy here. And I know I'm not unique in my position here. Yeah, check it out. Old guy who liked it when Lindy Ruff was the coach would like it again. He didn't get fired because he was incompetent. He got fired because it was time, and that's just the way things work in hockey. And he's still been at the top of his game, and he's still been bringing teams to high levels of success in the NHL, and he's still relevant. And I think it works. And if it doesn't work, that's okay. I'll do this for a couple years. All I want is to care about the team again, and I care about the team when that's the guy who's behind the bench. I understand that guy. I understand what he's going for. I get what makes him tick. I get why he succeeds. And I root for that kind of thing. So I am thrilled to have Lindy Ruff back. This is no surprise to anyone who knows me or remembers how I used to speak about him when I was on the air, when he was still here. But I am psyched that he is back. And I'm also psyched about the way that I found out about it. Happened to be in the car with WGR on. Got in the car, and Chris, Bulldog, says, Elliot Friedman just tweeted the Sabres might be close with Lindy Ruff. And then he explained how in the NHL there are a couple guys, when they tweet something like this, it's like 5 to 8 minutes from now, you're going to hear the announcement. So I had like 5 minutes to explain to my 9-year-old son who was in the car with me who Lindy Ruff was, what he meant to me, why I thought it would be a great idea to have him back, and then heard the announcement. And then we got somewhere, got out of the car for a little bit, got back in the car. Now there's some guy who is speaking glowingly about this hire. He's a caller speaking to Bulldog on the radio. And I know I recognize the voice, and I can't quite place it. And I can tell he's speaking from a position of authority. It's not just a guy in a car who likes the Sabres. This is somebody who's something. And I eventually realized it's Larry Quinn. And of course he likes the hire. He hired him the first time. And it all makes sense. But it was such a cool feeling for me. Now, this does feed into they're just doing it for a nostalgia point. And I get that because that is a part of it. But I know the difference between Ted Nolan coming back and Lindy Ruff coming back. Marv Levy being a general manager and what's happening here with Lindy Ruff, who's still a relevant person in the NHL. At least I believe he is. As I said, I have not been locked in for the last 12 years or so because I lost interest when my favorite coach was fired. Now that he's back, I'm back. And between Lindy Ruff and Josh Allen, let's have some fun here, Buffalo. All right, I promised more from my friends. 3 more interviews today, conversations. They're not really interviews. We're going to hear from Jeremy White, who you know from WGR, worked with me and Chuck back in the day at GR, Ann Burke, who used to do a show with Bob Gaughan, but we get a bit of her origin story, if you will, and also more from Bob Gaughan, who was kind of, I think I said in the last episode, he coached the coach. Chuck came in. They knew he had personality. How do you turn that into a radio thing? Bob Gaughan was kind of the guy behind the scenes shaping that. They ended up being great friends. So Bob's got a lot of insight there. So that's the end of me for now, but next you'll hear me with Jeremy White, then Ann Burke, then Bob Gaughan, and I will talk to you again very soon. There's an NFL draft coming up on Thursday. I'd like to hit something on Friday and get going with a regular podcast once again. Sorry for the month off. Please enjoy these conversations with Jeremy, Ann, and Bob. Thanks for listening to Writer Radio, and thanks for sticking with me.
I have two stories about Chuck. That
hit me.
One is inside radio business kind of stuff that is you're going to want to talk about it if I tell you. The other one's funny that I think everybody will love. So, I started at the station and Chuck was on post game. I remember being at college listening to GR, applying like, I'm going to be an intern there. I'm going to try and, cut my teeth and see what happens. And Chuck was a big part of the show, of the station. He was it. So I got a job part-time, Sunday night baseball, cutting sound on Sundays, Bills games. And I can remember the Chad Morton game. I worked post-game at that point, and I drive in after games, and I cut up sound, and I make sure that I'm doing the job that people need for sound for post-game. So, Brett, you know how it works. Like you cut, Drew Bledsoe said, blah, 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 15 seconds. Greg Williams said, blah, 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 15 seconds. And one time, as I was cutting the sound, Chuck walks by. And we had those little cubicles and those booths, and you could hear. And it wasn't in any way that I was doing anything wrong. But he walked by and he heard me cutting up a clip. And all he heard was, I think it had to be Greg Williams. It had to be training camp or somewhere like Williams was talking about what he's going to be like, what he's doing. And he hears Greg Williams say, we have a system, what we do. And he taps him and he says, give me that. I want that.
I felt that coming. Yep.
Yep. And I said, okay. And I'm like, do you want the rest of it? He goes, nope. Give me that. We have a system, what we do. And I said, okay. And he said, he didn't exactly say, like, just so you know how this works. But this is one of those moments where,
you got it.
A now talk show host, he said this. He said, in there, and he pointed to the update booth, in there, that's $5 an hour. And in there, he pointed to the studio, that's $200 an hour. And that, we have a system, I need that. That's $200 an hour. And right? Like the numbers are not right, of course.
Whatever.
The whole point was he was saying there's cutting sound and there's cutting sound.
Yeah.
There are sound bites and there are sound bites. And here's me, probably my first year. And he gives me that and I'm 21, 22. And I'm like, oh, yup.
That's amazing for where you are now. That really fucks you up for the $5 an hour job, though, because that's not what we're actually looking for unless you've got the vision to understand. Yeah, for the next 3 years, we're going to play that 2 seconds of audio 4,000 times.
Yep.
That's crazy.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Yep. And I'll never forget that. I've got moments, through my GR career, remember things. I'll never forget that. So that's the first story. That's like the radio story about like what Chuck was.
Yes.
And then the other one, this is like more listener stuff. And I think people would love about him. So, you get calls and he used to crown people. First time caller, he'd play the gong, like, let me get you. And that was cool. But the other thing is he knew that they were on delay. So that was back in the days where, people called more and people would swear and you'd get it in delay. So he'd get in delay. And he probably did it a bunch of times. I was told he did it a bunch of times. But I heard him do it live one time where somebody called up and gave him a rough ride and said a bunch of mean stuff about him. And he said, hey, Jim, you hear me? He goes, yeah. Go fuck yourself. And then he hit the dump button and hung up.
Right. And it wasn't streaming, so nobody got it unless you were in the room.
Right.
And the one guy that he was targeting absolutely got it.
Yup.
And when he told his friends that Dickerson said that to him, he couldn't prove it at all.
Right.
Oh, that's so good.
Yep.
Oh, that's so good.
Hey, do I got you? Yeah. Go fuck yourself. Dump. Those are my two big Chuck memories.
That's amazing. That's so good. What I've talked to a bunch of people about Chuck in the last couple days, and it's been super fun to reminisce about, really him being such a he is WGR doesn't exist without him. I mean that's a fact. Like, he was a monster with what he did. And so you could have loved him or hated him or, respected what he did or not respected what he did, but he did a thing that created job opportunities for a bunch of us, which is really cool. Yeah. And I talked about this with somebody, maybe Bob, that he was the guy that he didn't do anything for free. And that this goes back to your $5, $200 thing, whatever. But I remember him.
100%.
Yeah, he would, because we were young and he was old, we would be willing to do things new in our careers for no money. Hey, Brad, I need you to do this thing and this thing. Okay, sure. Because I thought that was the right thing to do. And he was the guy that pulled me aside and was like, you doing that is taking money out of my pocket. I didn't even know what he meant until he explained, look, if that's free, then what I do is not valuable. So my value is in part based on you recognizing your own value. And it just, there's so much about him that I think meant so much to me and means so much to the foundation of everything that exists at WGR right now.
As you say that, I remember exactly that lesson too. Like, asked to do something, like, what are they paying me? Like, I don't do anything for free. Why would I ever do anything for free? And that's a fine line to walk when you're new in the business. Right. You do as many things. I'll do everything. And then you get to a point. As soon as you're able to say no, of course, that's the difference between him and us, minimum wage. But like, that was a very important lesson. Like, once you get to a point, find out if you can say no. And as soon as you can say no and get paid for it, that's what you have to be doing. Yeah. You're not a nice guy. You're here to get paid. Yeah. Yeah. That's 100% a lesson. And, as you say, like, the other stuff, I'm thinking back to how what he really did, like, it's an era that's kind of gone. We don't really confront coaches in the way that we used to. We take calls, but these teams, and this is not a Bills point, it's every point. Every professional sports team now controls its own message. Right. They have their own radio, their own television, their own everything. So we kind of talk around them. And when they want to come on, they come on. And when they don't, they don't. They can send their message. And like, I think back to the Donahoe years, and when you and I were on together, like, we were not afraid of Tom Donahoe. We were not afraid of going after him hard. And we even had not even really public disputes. But when Donahoe went on the station that they were on at the time and said, if you want to be a jerk, call that other station, like, that was like Marv yelling about Chuck. That happened, and we were the guys he was talking about. So we were the guys, you and I, that got a rise out of Donahoe. Yeah. And then we made those jerk nation signs because he called us jerks. And we're like, hey, he thinks if you call this station, you're a jerk. And like, to be a part of it in that time, we were ready for a fight, whatever. Let's have a little fun, right? The Bills weren't any good. So yeah, I think on a level, he kind of probably emboldened a couple of young guys that could use a little bit of starch in their shirt. Like, don't be afraid of these guys, right? Yeah. You can say what you can say what you want to say.
Man, the Donahoe thing. Like, I don't think about him, but he was such a big part of our lives for like 5-6 years. I was in the room when we were in a dorm room at. Would it be Fisher? It must have been St. John Fisher. We're in a dorm room doing a show. And Bulldog was off, so I was in for him, and it was me and Shope and Tom Donahoe
This when Lostman broke his leg.
Yes. Yeah. When it was like, Mike basically was like, show me the video of that play. Can I see the video? Because I heard it's an accident, but I also heard it's not an accident. I want to see the video. And it was a major deal that I don't think we ever saw the video. No. But Troy Vincent hit Lossman and broke his leg. He was a rookie. He was a loudmouth. He was annoying. And it was like the veteran presence stepping down on the young loudmouth rookie or something. And we just wanted to see it because we wanted to know the real story. And that was a thing. I don't know where I'm going with this. I just, you brought back a memory that I forgot about. But I was sitting in a room when that happened. And then that was the end of our relationship with Tom Donahoe. Like he wanted nothing to do with us for the rest. So the Jerk Nation thing must have come after that. But wow, I forgot all about that. That's great that you brought that up.
Yep. So it's funny, like looking back, like he was whatever, rash. He was a lot of things. I told the story on the air this week about watching a game. When I was doing post game, I would go in, and if I went in early, I got to watch the fourth quarter with him in the studio or him in the control room, and he's watching stuff. And now we live in a time where all 22 and breakdowns and all that stuff and coaches' views is totally normal. I mean, the Manning cast exists. You can watch everything and see experts' views of it. But in 2002, you couldn't do that.
No, you needed to know Chuck.
So when I was in the control room watching the fourth quarter of a game for the Bills against the Patriots with Chuck, I'm just like, I'm not saying a word. And he's just, pointing, they want to do this, they're going to do this, watch this guy, like live, just like watching a Manning cast. And that happened a couple times. I'm like, I'm going in for the second half for every game because this is awesome to watch, to get this level of information. So, before you could get that, you had to actually know a coach, and he was the coach I knew.
The only time I think I ever called Chuck on the phone was because of Frank Wycheck. Remember, what phrase comes before Frank Wycheck? Do you know?
Home run throwback, or
how is he? No, he was H-back, Frank Wycheck. So he came into the league. He was a tight end, and then he was H-back, Frank Wycheck. And I didn't understand what was going on, but it was very common terminology when referring to him to call him H-back, Frank Wycheck. And the one day I was just so frustrated with it that I called Chuck at home, and I know I bothered him. He didn't want to be called by me. I was like, Chuck, I'm sorry. I just need your help with something. And once it was football related, he was into it. It's like, what are they talking about with H-back Frank Wycheck? Like, they just mean that sometimes they line him up as a halfback. I'm like, that's it? That's all it is? He's like, yeah, that's the whole thing. I'm like, all right, Chuck, thanks, sorry. He's like, no problem. Yep. But he was so happy to give me his football knowledge and also solved a problem for me. But also was annoyed that I called him, but also was okay with it because it was about football. So I don't know. That's who he is. That's the guy. He loved sharing that information with all of us. And then, he didn't like being called about it, but once he knew what it was, it was fine. How did you wind up on WGR? I know Chuck had something to do with it, but I don't remember your origin story.
So my origin story is this. I used to do sales for a living in pretty much most of New York State. So I was on the road all the time. And just so happened the places I frequented, even if they were pretty far across the state, I could still get WGR. And of course, being the heyday of the Bills, I wanted, to inject it into my veins. So I stayed connected as much as I could. And most of the time I was just driving from this little burg in New York State to that little burg. So I started calling into Chuck's show. The original call that I made, and I can't remember what the point was, but it was something I really disagreed with him about in football. And so I called in, and I had a rather strong opinion, which, as I was later to learn, Chuck just loved. And he didn't make fun of me. He didn't talk down to me. And, I kind of gave it as well as I got. And so I thought, well, that was a pretty great experience. So I started calling in quite a bit. Somewhere along the way in there, I got a call from Bob Gaughan, his producer, who you've already interviewed about Chuck. And Bob said, the coach wants to have you on his show for an hour once a week. And I was in my office. I was like, what? Am I having a stroke? Am I imagining this? And they weren't kidding. And so the next week, I can't remember. I think it was on Tuesdays. I came down to the studio, rather wide-eyed and kind of wondering what to expect. And I met the coach. That was the first time I had met him. And we did our hour. I mean, it seemed like it went by in 5 minutes to me, but just a lot of topics went back and forth. And again, tried to give as good as I got. And again, he seemed to really like that. So the original idea was to do it for an hour a week during football season. And then when football season was winding up, he asked me to just do it on a permanent basis. So I did it over into hockey season, and then in there, after that, I was sitting in the production room, and they mentioned that Kevin Sylvester at the time had taken another job in North Carolina. He had been on the air with Bob in the mornings, and they were kind of ruling, like, who were they going to get to fill Kevin's slot. And I said, why don't you have me do it? And the great part of that story is the guy that went to bat for me for that was Chuck. And Bob, of course, too. But Chuck went in and, talked to our manager, station manager at the time. And lo and behold, within a few weeks, I was on the air with Bob and had my couple of years of fame in radio and sports radio particularly. So Chuck putting me on the air as a woman, I thought was, I don't know, courageous might be too strong a word, but certainly nothing that had really been done. I mean, there was the Fabulous Sports Baby at the time, but other than the Fabulous Sports Babe and maybe Susan Waldman doing an occasional fill-in on WFAN, there really weren't women doing sports at that point, even so much as the sidelines or anything like that. So I always just thought it was really courageous, and obviously it worked out for me. And I met a wonderful gentleman too.
I have a couple different directions to go with this. One is, was it a novelty thing? Is that what drew Chuck to you? That, oh my God, this is a woman who sounds like she knows what she's talking about? Like, was he that impressed? Was it that crazy? Was it that unusual?
Yeah, well, I do believe, as the persona of Anne from Tonawanda, that I was about the only woman that called in at that point to the station to any show. So I do think there was the novelty of it, but I think the extra novelty was that I didn't just, have an opinion like, oh, Doug Flutie's too cute. You can't not make him their quarterback. I had, real football-based opinions, which I had developed because there are 5 girls in my family, and there were the first 5 in my family. And at some point, as I always say, I think my dad despaired that he would ever have a son. So he started teaching me about football, and I watched it with him all the time. It was kind of our thing to do, and then baseball and all the other sports. So I did know something about the game, and, so I think that was kind of a double novelty. Yes, I was a woman, but yes, I also kind of knew what I was talking about. And thirdly, I wasn't intimidated by him, which is sort of a joke because, his on-air persona, which was just fabulous, and you see it all the time now, but then it was a real novelty, the way that he conducted himself on the air. There couldn't be a person that was more different than that off the air. He's just a really lovable guy who 90% of the time was talking about his wife, Shirley, or his dogs. So, it was really a treat for me to get to know him as a person, frankly, because he was very open. as many people have said, and many cannot be repeated, but he had some of the best stories that anyone has ever heard. And it isn't like he told the same one over and over.
No.
He had a new story. Every time you talk to him, it's like, well, back in the day when I was with this, fill in the blank of somebody very famous. Yeah. And he'd have a great story. So he was just lovable, just kind of a lovable curmudgeon, really. So
I don't remember, maybe it was 2000, 2001, whatever it was when GR started. We're now in 2024. So it's been around for close to 25 years. You're still the only woman to ever be a part of it, I think, right?
I believe that. So to ever have maybe a day-to-day show, I think I am the only woman that's ever done it on GR. And frankly, up until, even just a few years ago, with a regular slot, I think that's true actually probably across the country. There was the Fabulous Sports Babe who was syndicated, and then there was myself. Eventually, Susan Waldman did a show overnights, I think, on WFAN. But at the time, I think I was pretty close to the only woman doing a regularly scheduled sports radio show, because it just wasn't done. And that's why the invitation even to be on the air was just kind of shocking.
I just thought of something else, and shoot me down if I'm wrong. I know that Mike Florio from Pro Football Talk, and now from NBC and all that stuff, he told me recently that his first time on the air on the radio was on WGR. Was that you that booked him or got in touch with him?
It was. I think Bob and I, of course, had our show together, and I don't remember how Bob found out about him, but I think that every time I see Mike Florio here, Mike Florio there, and I will tell everybody that his persona and presentation of himself and his information has changed dramatically from when he was working with Bob and I, because he was quite reliable and interesting then. But we were the first ones to ever have him on the air, Bob and I.
I remember we knew that Dennis Miller got hired by ABC to do Monday Night Football before the rest of the world knew it, and it was through Florio, and I think that was through you, if I'm remembering this correctly. But that all fits together in my mind, and I'm just thinking of it now. So if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But that I kind of believe that in addition to being groundbreaking as the only woman on GR and one of the only women in national in the scope of radio across the nation, you also brought us Mike first. You're groundbreaking, dude.
Yeah.
Look at you.
Well, yeah, sometimes groundbreaking is a synonym for old. So,
I'm old.
But I will take it as groundbreaking. No, it was groundbreaking at the time. And again, the person that put the first shovel in the ground of that was Chuck. I had appeared on a couple Sunday morning pregame shows with the Bowerly brothers prior to that, but the real launch to the short, but I'm never sorry I did it. Career in radio was Chuck, So very sad to see him gone, but larger than life is that's what he is, larger than life, literally. So
what was it about him on the air that was so distinctive to you in your version of what Chuck was? What was he? What made him him?
Well, the first thing, which was kind of silently in the background, because it wasn't something that he brought up a lot, but was the fact that he was grounded in all this knowledge. So the guy had done everything. He had played, he had coached high school, he had coached college, he had coached in the USFL, he had coached in the CFL, and he had coached in the NFL. So that the credentials there meant that what was coming out, which you might think was outrageous or crazy, Bob was quoting the other day about saying Eric Flowers was a loser the first time he saw him in training camp.
Yep.
He knew what it took to succeed in those roles. So if he said that, it's not that just something he decided to blurt out to get a reaction. It was based in all that knowledge. And that's what I really loved listening to him, because I learned, as we all did. I loved that he had opinions. And I also, frankly, think he was hysterically funny. So all of those things kind of working together just led to such an entertaining show, but also that you could take something away from. And I will admit, every once in a while it made me, just jump through the radio and grab him by the throat too, because he would aggravate me as well, which is one of the reasons I first called him. So
Well, that's what he was trying to do. That's exactly what he was trying
exactly.
to do. Sure.
Well, and at that time, I didn't really get that, if you will. This is what he wants to do. Obviously, as I got to know him a little better and watched, him do his show when I was on the air, he said to me once, and I'll never forget it. He said, "Ann, if they listen to me because they love me, that's great. If they listen to me because they hate me, that's great. It's all ratings." And, on the inside of the business, of course, that's the truth. And he didn't care if people didn't like him. I mean, in the on-air persona. And I can remember him, the tough guys calling him up and, I'm going to do this and that to you. And he's like, "Hey, my address is well known. Come on down to the studio. Let's have it out." So, which, of course, the radio muscles were at work there. None of them ever showed up. So
He only tried to fight me once.
well, that's probably a lot less than most of the in-studio guys. Honestly, he was great with most of the younger guys in the studio. I always thought, anyway.
Yeah, no, he was great. I called him out on something. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I know I was in a meeting with him and Tim Wenger, and the door was closed, and he wanted to go to the parking lot. Whatever it was.
Wow.
We got over it. We got over it like the next day. The fact that I didn't.
That's how he was.
Yeah, the fact that I didn't back down, I think he liked me better after that. But yeah, he wanted to fight me once. That was his idea, not mine. No, we did not fight. He was, 40 years older than me or something.
Yeah, that probably would have been a bad look. Yeah,
not ideal. Not great for an up and coming broadcaster as I was at the time, I think. All right. Anything else you want to add before I let you go, Ann? I really appreciate your time.
Oh, no, it's just that everybody should have the fondest memories of Chuck. I saw somebody post something. He was really a dumb guy. And I laughed so hard when I saw that. Chuck was brilliant. He was a really smart guy. And everybody should know that he had a heart of gold, and that he was really a pioneer, not just in Buffalo broadcasting, which I've seen said several places. He was a pioneer in broadcasting, period. His persona, the way he did his show, the people that he brought onto his show, it was an era in radio, not Buffalo radio, in radio that I don't know that we'll ever have again.
Hey, it's Brad. First thing I want to do is thank you for checking out this particular episode of Writer Radio. The second thing I want to do is tell you that your work is not done, because as every podcaster in the history of humanity has implored his or her listeners to do, it is helpful, essential that you do all the stuff. The stuff means subscribing and liking and downloading and rating and reviewing and saying nice things and sharing with friends. This podcast to keep it going, keep it growing, keep it moving, make everybody's life easier, get more, I was going to say eyeballs, but this is a podcast, more earballs on Writer Radio, bigger and better guests, better conversations, better everything. Everything about the show is better if you actively help me to share it with others. And you can do that by doing all of the things mentioned, not just by me just now, but by every podcaster who's ever sat down behind a microphone and done this. On with the show.
Chuck always talked about, goals. So we always would have, short-term goals and long-term goals. And the short-term goals, obviously, were the show for the day. The long-term goals would be getting a president on or stuff. And ultimately, though, he would always say, I want to compete. We're not competing with stations in Buffalo. I want to compete with national stations. I literally want to be like the best talk show host ever in Buffalo. And he said, and this is a good thing for like goal setting. He said, I don't think people like strive to be good enough, right? I want to be the best ever, because if we miss being the best ever, we're going to be really damn good. And he says, I think most people in life, achieve to be average or above average. And when you miss average, you become below average, right? So I want to strive to be the ultimate best. And then if not, we'll be pretty darn good. So years later, now later in life, we're talking, and he would always say to me, Bobby, when you see everybody and we look back on the show, I don't know if we were the best ever. That somebody else could decide we were the best talk show hosts ever in Buffalo. But I'll tell you this, we were pretty damn good. And I think that, that was, and I think that's true. And anybody that was a part of the show, I think can, say we were pretty damn good.
The episode I put out, with the full conversation with you, I put it out yesterday. I'm saying yesterday, but it might be 2 days ago when you're listening. I don't even know. I started it. I just Googled Chuck and found audio of him, and it was he must have been like 1 year into radio, and some station, I didn't recognize the anchor, but it was a story about this phenomenon happening in radio, and I assume it's like a Rochester station or something. But it was he was talking about Tokyo Rose. You remember that? I totally forgot about the Tokyo Rose thing. But
yes,
Marv called him Tokyo Rose, and he just went with it. And listening to him, I opened the episode with audio of him from that. And I just want to be better at everything now. From the way he was so freaking good at taking his energy and driving it into you. And that's what I got from this little clip of audio that's at the beginning of the last podcast before this one that you're hearing. So if you're hearing this one, talking to Bob, there's a full conversation with Bob and also some audio with Chuck that you are going to want to hear. It's super good.
You experienced it, when you went out, like to remote, because he never wanted to do any show because he was all about making money, right? So we did so many remotes, right? And just the way people gravitated to him, people wanted to touch him, have a piece of him or something. And of course he loved, being, he was bigger than, he was larger than life, right?
Yeah.
I mean, larger than life character. And that's why I always say, if there's, at the end of your life, if, just be on your deathbed, if you say, okay, who were the 10 characters that you met in your life, or 5 characters, I think we would say Chuck would be in that list. Whatever.
Yeah.
Right? He was definitely one of the 5 or 10 people that you would put in that list.
Yeah, you're one of mine, by the way. If I go 10, you are top 10. You're a whole different fucking thing, and that's what I love. I mean, it's great, but. Fuck. I mean, the thing I'm obsessed right now with, like, if I was a different person, I lived in California, Chuck is a documentary to me. Like, he is worth, like, everybody's got a fucking story and they're all awesome. So, like, I don't know. I don't, part of me thinks the next 5 episodes of this podcast are going to be people talking about Chuck. Like, it's just insane.
No, it is. And he knew everybody. I'll never forget the time. There's so many little tidbits and stuff like that. But he says, okay, we're interviewing Belichick's the coach of Cleveland. He says in his one of his coaches, he was this Rick Venturi. So Venturi comes on, and we got these 2 guys, these 2 Browns assistant coaches. And it's Venturi and it's Nick Saban. No shit.
Jesus Christ.
We got Nick. And then within a year or two after that, Saban's the head coach of Michigan State, and the legend
Right. Then
moves
LSU,
on
then
from there.
Illinois. Right.
And
Yeah.
and it was like he somehow had a connection that's Nick Saban. I mean, it was just crazy. All the
Right.
people
Yeah.
that he somehow knew. Well, the one thing I didn't know is he had that Eastern Illinois connection. So he's part of that. Again, one of his mentors is Daryl Mudra, who's the head coach of Eastern Illinois, and so in '72 he's there, and his quarterback is Mike Shanahan. Shanahan comes back in '78, and Chuck's the defensive coordinator. He's the offensive coordinator, and he's there from '78 to '82. And who's their quarterback in '82 but Sean Payton?
Wow.
And of course, Chuck raised because this guy had a bad life.
Brad Childress.
Brad Childress. So in that short period of time, from '78 to '82, there's 3 NFL head coaches
that are just his friends. Yeah, right.
That were his friends at Eastern Illinois: Mike Shanahan, Sean Payton,
and
Brad Childress, and a college football Hall of Fame. Daryl Mudra's in the College Football Hall of Fame. And so, I mean, it's it was just that connection of all the people that he knew. Well, and the other thing about that, by the way, that Super Bowl thing is Chuck leaves, and Shope hated the Super Bowl. He didn't want it was. Because it was so hard. It's really hard to do what Chuck would do there, right? No other station, would just be on the fly and I'm going to interview anybody because you got to be really fucking good, you know?
Yeah.
With no preparation. So what other stations, they would tape, you would tape interviews and run them, but you wouldn't do it on the fly because you could look like a fucking idiot, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's the problem with doing shit on the fly is you could look really fucking stupid when you ask a dumb question. But he never looked stupid. I mean, that's why I said he was an incredible talent.
Even if he did look stupid, he didn't care that he looked stupid, so he could bounce back from being stupid on the next question. Like that's different,
Yeah.
Like I feel like I'm that way. Like give me anybody, I'll talk to anybody, and it would be great if we could edit it, but we're gonna do it live, so fine. I still think I mentioned this in the other our conversation yesterday about Baja Men who let the dogs out. You guys were in, was that Houston probably or Jacksonville? One of those weird city Super Bowls. And you guys went down there. And that was first interview of like Monday Radio Row. And that's how Chuck had to open the show, was with the fucking Baja Men who let the dogs out. Nobody even thinks it's a good song. Nobody gives a shit. And that's what he did. But he sounded like, I'm here with them and we know them. And like, he just sounded fine. And it was, I mean, I knew and you knew. And, some people knew, but he sounded fucking great talking to these morons who did the worst song of all time.
Well, the other time he was in his element, the classic was we wound up, we used to do that trivia show. Now you can't even do these shows. It's part of the thing you can't even do today because everybody thinks you would be looking on your phone. We had that panel, and it was me and Milton Northrup and Mike Harrington and
Bailey,
whoever. Yeah, Bailey and
Time.
And he was in his element because he didn't know fucking
No, it
shit.
didn't matter.
But what he did know was how to fucking irritate.
Oh, make fun of everybody for being stupid when he was the dumbest person there. But not really, but yeah.
Right, and people would hate it, and he would come up and he would make, "We kicked your ass," and he would never answer one question, and he would just irritate the audience.
Yes,
and it was such a great show. It was such a great show.
It really was awesome.
Just him pissing everybody off.
Right.
And making fun of them that we kicked your ass, and they're like, you never answer a damn question.
I don't need to, buddy. Like it doesn't matter. Yeah, that was awesome. Yeah. I think I might have talked about that with Josh yesterday. Not that exact point of it, but I know for sure that we were naming the people that were on the trivia show, so it must have happened. Thank
Well,
you.
I mean, ultimately, I'm glad that you're doing it, and it is because what I did say, there were a lot of people that were a part of that show, and I'm glad, and he wanted that they all, whether you, Chris Brown, whether it's Paul or whatever, that feel like, yes, it was a really good show, and I had my little part of it. And that's what he wanted. He wanted everybody to this, I'm glad to this day, Josh Gregory thinks, that was a good fucking show.
Yeah.
And by the way, I was a little part of it, or whoever, every Jerry Sullivan, Tim Graham, and that's really what he wanted. So I'm talking about his legacy. What you're doing right now is part of his legacy. You're interviewing all people that were somewhat of a part of that show, and they all feel really good about it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You feel good, like I was a part of something special that was in Buffalo radio. Like we were pretty we were pretty fucking good,
Yeah, yeah. I have tears in my eyes right now, and I'm slightly embarrassed about it, but not really. I didn't know that I felt this passionately about what he did and what we've done together until he died, and I went, well, I should talk to Bob about it. And then I was like, I should talk to this person and this person and this person and that, and it's everyone. It's all the people that I care about in Western New York, like in the media realm, and everyone's got something. Like I got invited, by the way. Mike Shope texted me asking me to come on GR to talk about Chuck, but I couldn't do it because it was right. I had basketball practice. I'm coaching basketball, so I couldn't do it. And then he asked about, can I do it on Friday? And I can't do that either. But I am honored to have been invited onto the radio station where Chuck worked, where I worked, to talk about Chuck. I'm honored just to be asked. Can't do it, but man, I feel great about that. And and it ties right back into exactly what you're saying, where like I feel like I'm a part of that legacy that he has left, and I'm a little. It's weird. I have like family members who die, and I don't feel anything. I say all the things you're supposed to say, and I just don't feel shit. Losing Chuck means something to me. It's a big deal to me. And it's a big deal to so many people that mean so much to me.
Yeah, there's two things. One is I've never had a connection. Looking back, you're older. Okay, so how many years have I been? I've been working for 37 years, 38 years, or whatever. The connection that I had with him is just rare. It's like we just knew each other, and he's 30 years older than me, but so we weren't in the same age group, or anything like that. But somehow we had this connection where I knew what he was thinking, he knew what I was thinking, and it worked, right? So talk about I almost got him one time. You're talking about you're being choked up. This is him. He gets let go, and I feel like I got to get him something, right? But what do I get him? He's a millionaire. He doesn't need any money. At this point he's in Florida. This was, I think, before he went to Chicago. So I thought about it, and the only time I almost got him, and the only time I ever heard him choked up. Okay, so I send him an award. Okay, and you think this is stupid until I finish it. So I get him a plaque. Okay, and I affix this huge doorknob to it, this golden doorknob, and I call it the Golden Doorknob Award. And the plaque says from to Chuck Dickerson, from Bob Gone, the Golden Doorknob Award, and it said for all the doors in my life and in my mind that you opened up for me in recognition of this.
Jesus
And
Christ.
he calls
You're
me.
gonna make me cry again, jerk.
He calls me up, and he's choked. The only time in his life where he's choked up. The only time I almost got him. And he said, "That was good. that was a good. That was good. That was
That's
good.
awesome.
And
That's awesome.
yeah, that was and that's that was the last thing that whatever that was 20 years ago or whatever it was. When he and then of course. I got let go a year later. And by the way, his instincts, I forgot to tell this part of the story. I don't want to tell this because it's a bad part, but
Do it.
Greg Reed takes over, and Greg Reed comes in and meets us. So, introduces himself, walks out.
Wait, who's in charge before Greg? Larry Levitt?
No. So this is before the merger. So that was before. So when we merged, Greg Reed takes over. Before Greg Reed took over, that was
Pastrick.
It was Pastrick, and Pastrick is the general manager, and it was the GR connection. And then GR loses essentially, right? And the BEN people take over. And Reed comes in and introduces us, and everything's fine. It's a fine introduction. Yeah. But as soon as he leaves, and this is Chuck's instincts, and he says, "Bobby, we just met the person that's going to fire us both."
Correct.
And he was right. And it wound up being a couple years later after that. But he was right. It was the guy that fired us both. He just knew it right from the start.
I really, no joke, just believe that dude influenced all of us so much, and it's fucking cool. And I have the ability to talk to people about that. So,
I'm glad. Chris, because of what Chuck did, Chris was sometimes put in tough spots.
Yes, I know. That's what we talked about. That was the whole fucking 30 minutes that is lost.
Yeah.
And I hope he will say it again. But yes, that's what it was. Like, man, it was tough being that. Like, because I know that my first training camp, 98, I went to Fredonia with Bulldog and Kevin. Me, Chris, and Kevin were the sports team at BEN. And we would do, we're doing a 5-hour show, 6 to 11. And every day we would just pick a spot. So it'd be like, today's D-line. Tomorrow's O-line. This is receivers. This is whatever. So we would go try to interview them, and it was usually like a double session, so you get 2 tries to get people. But we would all right, so today we're doing D-line, and it was Carl Levra was the D-line coach. Sylvester's going to get him. Chris is going to get, I don't even know who it was. Leon Seals? I don't know if he was there. Whatever. I was in charge of interviewing Bruce Smith. Yeah, that was my gig.
Yeah.
24-year-olds. Go talk to Bruce. So I walk up to him with a BEN mic flag. And he's like, "You're not with Chuck." Basically, it was like, "You're not Dickerson?" Okay.
Yeah.
I'll talk to you. We have to go over here behind this tree. I stood behind a tree to interview Bruce Smith so that WGR couldn't have that audio. And what the and that's Chuck. Chuck did that. Everybody fucking hated Chuck.
Yeah. Well, but there were two other things that come to mind. One is one of the specials we did. Our draft specials. There was that one year. It's different today. Remember everybody would go to the Senior Bowl, and we would get everybody. And I think I don't know if you were a part of it, but we would just get everybody to try and interview everybody in the draft. And there was one year.
Oh yes,
we would be on for the first 2 rounds. That there's 64 picks in the first 2 rounds, and we had 60 of the guys interviewed. So I mean, those types of that'll never happen again. Yeah. I mean, those types of things. That's like, and that's where Chuck said that's like national level shit. And that's where he said, I want our draft special to compete with ESPN. Screw it. At the time, like, we're competing with BEN, it's us versus BEN. He's like, no,
Right.
we're competing with ESPN.
Empire Sports.
Yeah, right. No, we're competing with ESPN. And there were times when we put on shows like that where we get 60 of the first 64 that
That's
we thought,
unreal. That is unreal.
Yeah, right. And it was easier back then because now you get, the Senior Bowl, nobody goes to the Senior Bowl, but at that particular time, everybody went to the Senior Bowl. That's one thing. The second thing is he's so hot. There are certain coaches, and edit this name out, but in the Flutie Johnson year, which is so hot.
That's 98.
The 98, the special teams, the
Ronnie
whole thing,
Jones.
nobody ever. No. This is before this. Before Ronnie Jones. Ronnie Jones becomes a coach because they fired DeHaven, right?
Oh shit!
Because of home run throwback. One of the little elements there is DeHaven, who knew Chuck, is trying to defend himself and is calling Chuck throughout that year, saying, "Wade isn't giving me any time. Wade doesn't believe in special teams. Don't criticize, because Chuck is so hot, right?
Yeah.
And Bruce is trying to defend himself.
Bruce is one of the best people I've ever met. Like,
right.
I've already talked about watching that Four Falls of Buffalo thing, but I'm looking at him and I'm so sad that he is dead. I loved that guy. Part of it is because we had the same musical taste, but he is awesome. So this makes sense that he's just a smart dude.
Right.
Talking to the guy. Yeah.
But the special teams aren't great, but, Wade, and again, Wade has strengths and weaknesses, without a doubt.
Sure.
But one of his weaknesses, he didn't care about special teams. I mean, it's just beyond, and that's why he wound up getting fired, right? Because he wound up having his buddy, after he fires DeHaven, he winds up having his buddy, and Ronnie Jones is the worst special teams coach of all time. But this year's going on. Now, this is way overshadowed because of Flutie Johnson. I mean, the Flutie Johnson thing just, winds up.
All we did for 2 years.
Blowing up, and it blows up at the end of that year. And Johnson is is obviously the quarterback for that game. But a little hidden element, obviously, is Chuck knows, and Chris would help him do this too. So Chris sometimes would tell Chuck, "This is what I believe," but then Chris would go down, and he was so good. Chris is going to play the reporter. Chris would play the reporter, and he would go down, and he would just play this, and he's the straight man. But Chris knew he could come back and say, by the way, this is what I believe. Go on the air, and Chuck would go off on what Chris believed. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And again, and then so DeHaven's using Chuck, to defend himself, right?
But Chuck understands it. He knows he's being used, but you still.
But he also knows that he's got good information.
Right.
He's not going to screw it.
Right.
So he's just going to go on with, my opinion is that, and he knows he's right? And this is what he would do all the time with any nugget of information. My opinion is that, Wade Phillips doesn't care about special teams. And now he knows he's right?
Right.
Because he's got the information.
It's not an opinion at this point. It's a fact, but he's going to state it as an opinion.
He's going to state it, right, as an opinion. He's not going to give up his source or whatever, and he's just going to go on. But he knows he's on the right track, and that's what he would do with whether it was Chris Brown or DeHaven's, and then of course what happens, and DeHaven gets thrown under the bus like it was his fault. He gets fired, I think, because of that home run throwback when, and so it was, those things would happen so that there were people that, the point is, there were people that hated Chuck, sure, within the organization, but I think they knew there were other people that were calling him,
which is what made them hate him more.
Yes, which made them hate him more because they're trying to defend themselves, and he knew so many people, Ted Cottrell and Bruce DeHaven and all these other coaches for a while that he didn't, so they would feed him information, and stuff like that. So that was you never get that.
No,
something never going to happen. Never going to happen again. And that's why I said we all were a part of something that would never, ever, ever, ever happen again.